cloth moved. Samuel Garrett froze halfway across his cabin floor, coffee cup suspended in his weathered grip. The bundle on his kitchen table, wrapped tight in his grandmother's quilt, shifted again, and a muffled voice escaped from within. "I can't breathe." His heart hammered against his ribs. 3 hours ago, he'd found the bundle abandoned on his porch, left like a discarded sack of grain. No note, no explanation, just 20 pounds of something wrapped in faded blue cotton, tied with fraying rope. Now it was speaking. Samuel set down his cup with deliberate care, his eyes never leaving the quilt. The voice came again, female, young, desperate. His calloused fingers found the rope knots, working them loose with the same patience he used to gentle wild horses. The cloth fell away in layers, revealing pale skin, tangled dark hair, and eyes the color of winter storm clouds. A girl. Maybe 16, maybe younger. Alive, breathing, staring up at him with a mixture of terror and defiance that made his chest tighten. "Please," she whispered, struggling to sit upright. "Don't send me back." Samuel stepped backward, his mind reeling. In 43 years of ranching this harsh stretch of Montana territory, he'd seen plenty that defied explanation. Phantom lights dancing over the prairie, cattle found miles from where they'd been left, his own father's voice calling his name years after the burial. But a living girl wrapped like cargo and delivered to his doorstep? She wore a simple white dress, now stained with dirt and what looked suspiciously like blood. No shoes, no coat. Her wrists bore rope burns, fresh enough to still weep. "Who are you?" Samuel's voice came out rougher than intended. "Who did this to you?" The girl's eyes darted toward the window, where evening shadows stretched long fingers across the valley floor. "They'll come looking," she said, pulling the quilt tighter around her shoulders. "They always come looking." Samuel followed her gaze. In the distance, barely visible through the gathering dusk, smoke rose from the direction of Bitter Creek. Too much smoke for cook fires, too black for anything natural. Something was burning, something big. "We need to get you to town," Samuel said, already moving toward his rifle rack. "Sheriff Brennan will—" "No." The girl's voice cracked like a whip. "You don't understand. The sheriff, he's one of them." Samuel's hand stilled on the Winchester stock. "One of who?" She pulled herself to her feet, swaying slightly. The quilt slipped, revealing more of the blood on her dress. Not her blood, Samuel realized with growing unease. Too much of it, too dark, spattering the fabric like paint flung from a brush. "The Covenant," she whispered. "They call themselves the Covenant of Purity. They took me 3 days ago. Took all of us." "All of who?" Her lips moved soundlessly for a moment, as if the words were too heavy to speak aloud. "The other girls. There were 7 of us. They said we were chosen. Special." She touched her throat, where Samuel could now see the faint outline of rope burns. "They have rituals, things they do in the name of cleansing the territory of sin." Samuel felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd heard whispers in town, stories of missing girls, families too frightened to speak openly about daughters who'd vanished in the night, stories the sheriff claimed were just runaways and Indian troubles. How did you escape? The girl's eyes went distant. "I didn't. Not alone. Sarah, she was barely 14. She fought them when they came for me, gave me time to run." Her voice broke. "I heard her screaming as I climbed out the window." Through the cabin's thin walls, Samuel caught the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Distant still, but unmistakable. Multiple horses moving fast across hard ground. The girl heard it too. Her face went chalk white. "They found me," she breathed. Samuel moved to the window, peering through the gap in the curtains. 6 riders crested the hill overlooking his property, silhouetted against the dying light. Even at this distance, he could see they wore the dark coats and wide-brimmed hats favored by the territory's more zealous religious factions. "There's a root cellar," he said quickly, "under the kitchen floorboards. You can—" "No." The girl straightened, something fierce kindling in her storm-colored eyes. "I won't hide anymore. I won't let them take another girl like they took Sarah, like they took the others." The hoofbeats grew louder. Samuel looked at the girl, really looked at her. Beneath the terror and exhaustion, he saw steel, the kind of strength that came from surviving the unsurvivable. His grandfather had worn that same expression during the Apache Wars, the look of someone who'd decided dying on their feet beat living on their knees. The riders were close enough now that Samuel could hear their voices carrying on the wind, harsh, commanding tones discussing search patterns and punishment. His choice crystallized with brutal clarity: hand over the girl and live quietly, or stand against men who clearly had the sheriff's protection. The knock came like thunder against Samuel's door, 3 heavy blows that seemed to shake the entire cabin. "Samuel Garrett!" The voice outside was smooth as snake oil and twice as poisonous. "We know you're in there. We've come for what's ours." Samuel pressed his back to the wall beside the door, Winchester cradled in his arms. The girl crouched behind the kitchen table, wrapped in his grandmother's quilt-like armor. Through the window, he could see the riders had spread out in a loose circle around the cabin. No escape routes, no blind spots. "Don't know what you're talking about, Reverend Thorne," Samuel called back, recognizing the voice now. Ezekiel Thorne ran the mission of sacred redemption on the far side of Bitter Creek, preaching fire and damnation to anyone who'd listen. Samuel had always given the man's operation a wide berth. "Our ward has wandered from her flock," Thorne continued, his tone never losing its practiced calm. "A troubled girl, prone to flights of fancy. Her family is beside themselves with worry." The girl's eyes blazed with fury. She mouthed a single word: liar. Samuel had no doubt she was right. The rope burns on her wrists, the blood on her dress, the bone-deep terror in her voice. None of that spoke to family concern. "Haven't seen any girl," Samuel said. "Been working cattle all day." A different voice spoke up, younger, cruder. "Maybe we should take a look around, make sure she ain't hiding somewhere." "That won't be necessary, Brother Marcus." Thorne's rebuke carried the sting of a lash. "Mr. Garrett is a God-fearing man. If he says the girl isn't here, surely we can take him at his word." The silence stretched like a held breath. Samuel could practically feel Thorne's smile through the wooden door. "Of course," the Reverend continued, "it would be remiss of us not to search the property. For the girl's safety, you understand. She's been through such trauma, might be hiding, afraid to show herself even to those who love her most." Samuel heard the soft whisper of steel being drawn, multiple blades, multiple guns. The message was crystal clear: cooperate, or be overwhelmed. Through the cabin's back window, Samuel spotted movement in the tree line, more men, closing off his last avenue of retreat. They'd come prepared for resistance. "Sarah died screaming," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "They made the rest of us watch while they purified her. Said it was God's will." Samuel's jaw clenched. These weren't lawmen serving justice. They were predators hunting prey. The door handle turned slowly, testing. Finding it locked, someone began working at the mechanism with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds, Samuel murmured to the girl. "When shooting starts, you run for the cellar and don't look back." She shook her head. "I told you, I won't hide anymore." The lock gave way with a metallic click. "Wait." The girl's voice stopped Samuel's finger on the Winchester's trigger. She stood slowly, letting the quilt fall to the floor. "Let me see him first." "Are you insane?" Samuel hissed. "These men will kill us both." But she was already moving toward the door, her bare feet silent on the wooden planks. Something had changed in her face. The terror was still there, but it was wrapped now in cold determination. "My name is Rebecca Morse," she said quietly, her hand on the door latch. "My father owns the general store in Bitter Creek. 3 days ago, I was walking home from delivering supplies to Mrs. Henderson when they took me." She turned to meet Samuel's eyes. "I want you to know who I am when you tell this story later." Samuel felt something crack open in his chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about bearing witness. The door swung open to reveal Reverend Thorne standing on the porch, flanked by 2 younger men in black coats. Thorne was exactly as Samuel remembered: tall, lean, with the kind of pale eyes that seemed to look right through a person's soul and find it wanting. "Rebecca, child," Thorne's voice dripped false compassion. "Look how you've worried us all. Come now, let's get you home to your family." Rebecca stepped into the doorway but came no close. "Sir, where are they, Reverend? Where are Mary and Catherine and little Sarah?" Something flickered across Thorne's face. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "Safe in the Lord's embrace, child, as you will be, once you stop this foolish running." "Sarah's dead, isn't she?" Rebecca's voice never wavered. "You killed her like you killed the others, called it purification." Samuel saw Thorne's men shift restlessly, hands drifting toward their weapons. But the Reverend himself remained perfectly still, studying Rebecca with the intensity of a hawk watching a mouse. Mr. Garrett, Thorne said finally, never taking his eyes off the girl, I wonder if you know the penalty for harboring stolen property in this territory. Rebecca's not property, Samuel said, stepping up beside her. She's a human being. Thorne smiled, a cold, reptilian expression. All souls belong to the Almighty, Mr. Garrett. Some simply lose their way. His pale gaze fixed on Rebecca. But the Lord provides shepherds to guide the flock home. Rebecca reached into her dress pocket and withdrew something small, a locket, Samuel saw, tarnished silver catching the last rays of sunlight. Sarah gave me this before she died, Rebecca said, holding it up so Thorne could see. Said her mother gave it to her, told her it would keep her safe. Her voice broke slightly. She was wearing it when you slit her throat. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no bird song, no sound except the hammering of Samuel's heart. Thorne's mask finally slipped, revealing something ugly underneath. Enough, he said quietly. Brothers, take her. Samuel's rifle spoke first. The Winchester's bark split the evening air, sending Thorne diving sideways off the porch. Samuel pumped another round into the chamber as Rebecca disappeared back inside the cabin. But the Reverend's men were already moving, one rushing the door while the other circled toward the windows. Samuel dropped the first man with a shot to the chest, but the second made it through the kitchen window before Samuel could turn. The intruder's pistol swung toward Rebecca, and time seemed to crystallize into a single, perfect moment of choice. Samuel threw himself between them. The bullet meant for Rebecca punched into his shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to one knee. Through the haze of pain, he saw Rebecca snatch up a cast-iron skillet and bring it down on the gunman's skull with both hands. The man crumpled like a broken scarecrow. Outside, Thorne was shouting orders to his remaining men. Samuel heard boots on the roof. They were coming down the chimney, through the back window, everywhere at once. The cellar, Samuel gasped, blood seeping between his fingers as he clutched his shoulder. Now! But Rebecca was already moving toward the front door, the bloodied skillet still in her grip. No more running, she said simply. She stepped onto the porch as Thorne emerged from behind his horse, pistol drawn. 4 of his men flanked him, weapons trained on the slight figure silhouetted in the doorway. It's over, child, Thorne said. Come quietly, and Mr. Garrett lives. Resist further, and I'll burn this place with both of you inside. Rebecca lifted Sarah's locket, letting it catch the dying light. You're right, Reverend. It is over. The explosion came from the direction of Bitter Creek, a massive fireball that lit the eastern horizon like a second sunset. Thorne and his men spun toward the sound, confusion replacing confidence on their faces. That would be your precious mission, Rebecca said calmly. I may have escaped your rituals, but I didn't escape empty-handed. Lamp oil burns quite nicely when you know where to pour it. Samuel struggled to his feet, understanding flooding through him. The blood on her dress, it hadn't all belonged to the other. Girls. Some of it was Thorne's followers, the ones she'd left behind in the burning building. Thorne's face contorted with rage. You little... Sheriff Brennan's voice cut through the night like a blade. Drop your weapons, all of you! The lawman emerged from the tree line with 6 deputies, rifles trained on Thorne's group. Samuel blinked in confusion. The girl had said Brennan was part of the covenant. Rebecca sent word through the telegraph office before coming here, Brennan explained, keeping his rifle sighted on Thorne. Seems there has been some disturbing activities happening at the mission. Federal marshals are already en route. Thorne's men looked between their leader and the encircling deputies, calculating odds that were no longer in their favor. One by one, they lowered their weapons. 3 weeks later, Samuel sat on his porch watching Rebecca hang laundry on the line he'd strung between 2 cottonwood trees. Her wrists had healed, though she still wore long sleeves to hide the scars. Some wounds, Samuel had learned, went deeper than skin. The trials had been swift and brutal. Thorne and his surviving followers faced federal judges who took a dim view of murder, dressed up as religious fervor. The Reverend himself would hang before the first snow. They'd found the other girls' bodies in the mission's basement, 7 graves in what Thorne had called his purification garden. Rebecca had insisted on attending every burial, standing silent in her black dress as each girl was laid to proper rest. You don't have to stay, you know, Samuel said as Rebecca approached the porch, empty laundry basket in her arms. Your father's been asking when you'll come home. Rebecca settled into the chair beside him, watching the sun sink toward the western mountains. This is home now, she said simply. If you'll have me. Samuel nodded, understanding more than she probably knew. Some people were born to wander. Others were meant to stand guard. Rebecca Morse had seen the darkness that lived in men's hearts and chosen to stand between it and the innocent. In the distance, smoke still rose from the ruins of the mission of sacred redemption, but it was clean smoke now, the kind that came from burning away poison, leaving the ground ready for something better to grow. Rebecca fingered Sarah's locket, which she wore now as a reminder rather than a keepsake. "Do you think they're at peace?" she asked. "The girls who didn't make it out?" Samuel considered the question as evening settled over the valley like a gentle benediction. "I think they're proud," he said finally. "Proud that someone remembered them. Proud that someone fought back." Rebecca smiled, the first real smile Samuel had seen from her since that night 3 weeks ago. It transformed her face, revealing the woman she was becoming beneath the scars of what she'd survived. Together they watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, two sentinels keeping watch over a valley slowly learning to sleep peacefully again. In years to come, folks would tell stories about the night the mission burned, about the girl who brought down a killer disguised as a holy man. But Samuel would remember something simpler: the moment Rebecca chose to stand rather than hide, and how that choice had changed everything. Some battles, he'd learned, were worth fighting regardless of the cost. Some stands were worth taking, even when you stood alone. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.